Evan Wolfson, Executive Director of Freedom to Marry and author of Why Marriage Matters, America, Equality, and Gay People's Right to Marry, which was published by Simon & Schuster in 2004. There really were two chapters in my life that kind of laid the foundation for my work today. One was that between college and law school, I was in the Peace Corps. And serving in the Peace Corps in West Africa, I made what was not a particularly profound discovery, but it was profound to me, and it was original to me, although obviously most people already kind of knew it. And that was that living in a small village in West Africa on my own for the first time, dealing with people and so on, and especially coming out to myself as gay and figuring out what that meant in a society where homosexuality was not acknowledged and where there was certainly no open gay identity and so on, I realized that a large part of who you are as a person is shaped by the society that you're in, and that options that are available, ways to think about your life, you are not always able to have, depending on where you live and what time you live and so on. So that, for example, many of the people I met, many of my friends, people in the village and so on, I think had they lived in another country, would have been gay. But because they lived in a society and in circumstances where it simply was not an option for them, whatever their own innate sexual orientation and identity and attractions and desires, their ability to shape an identity around it was simply not there. Again, not a particularly novel discovery, but it was a discovery for me at the age of 21 living in Africa. So when I came back from the Peace Corps with this awareness and understanding and went into law school, I of course immersed myself in study of law, but I spent a lot of my time in law school actually figuring out what did it mean to be gay now back in the United States. What was my life as a gay man going to be? And I did a lot of reading and a lot of thinking, and I read the book that changed my life. And that book was by a historian named John Boswell, and it was called Christianity, Social Tolerance, and Homosexuality. And Boswell's book traced the first couple thousand years of Western history, showing how, in essence, society had not always treated gay people the way we treat gay people in our society today. And therefore, because it hadn't always been as bad and as repressed and defined in the same way as it was today, it didn't have to be as defined and repressed as it is today, and therefore could change. As somebody who always has loved history and really reads history all the time, finding that window through history into my own personal feelings and desires, and then being able to meld that to my desire to do something in the world, really reshaped my whole thinking about what I was going to do in my life. Because if this could be changed, it should be changed. And I found that through history. So building on that, and building on this lesson about the way you define yourself being shaped by your society, when it came time at Harvard to write what was called the third-year paper, in essence the dissertation, I chose to write on a topic related to gay people, and I decided I would write about what I called in my paper, in words I would never use today because I don't like the way I use the language, but it was same-sex marriage and morality, the unwritten human rights vision of the Constitution. And in essence, it was a paper arguing, drawing on law, but also on religion, on culture, why gay people should have the freedom to marry, why this was important to fight for, why it was a matter of justice and indeed of constitutional law. So that was in 1983, and this was at a time where no country in the world allowed gay people to marry, where the idea of what was not even yet called domestic partnership had only barely begun being developed. And I, in essence, have been working on the freedom to marry, as I now call it, really ever since. It was those personal experiences in my life, the growing understanding as to how to connect that to my passions for history and for law and for social change, melding the personal with the political, and having the opportunity to then synthesize that into a paper that laid the foundation for organizing my thinking on it, that launched me into the work today. One of my favorite quotes years later from a law professor in a newspaper article that did a profile on me, they went back and dug out and found the professor who was the advisor to the paper. And he was quoted as saying in the paper that it's so refreshing as a law professor to find a student who actually applied something he learned in law school, even though he gave me a B. So I always found that very funny.